It's not like the American president where Michael J. Fox says, I got to write a brand new speech. The last, minute stuff, you kind of want to see what the country's seeing and hear the immediate reaction, positive and negative.
I think Biden was saying, I'm not a lip reader, but I play one on TV. I think he said feeling good when he walked out of the White House and was going to
the little kind of fist pump that he got.
Very good.
Yeah, feeling good.
Yeah. Waving as he goes. Also keep in mind that this is the first time that a president gives a State of the Union. We don't call it a State of the Union, but it effectively is. So 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, at least one of the States of the Union that President Biden has had to give had to be changed at the last minute because of the invasion of Ukraine.
That's right. It was in 2022, and the speech that we had prepared was leading with the economy, as they often do, almost always do. And we essentially ripped up the speech, which doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does happen because of events in the world. And the speech, as you all remember, became largely about Russia and Ukraine and the moment we were facing. And it's not quite that at all, but I was speaking with somebody from the White House yesterday. I was curious about what they were going to say, the president was going to say about Gaza, and they said it's not quite written yet because it is an issue. Obviously, there was an announcement today they made about aid and assistance where they want to provide the most up-to-date detail. And there are issues, especially in national security, where you sometimes do have to wait. You sometimes do have to rewrite it or scrap it or change it or move it around where it is in the speech.
The size of this motorcade is intense. I mean, I know this always happens for State of the Union. It always happens for any presidential movement at all. But the fact that this is presidential movement and State of the Union, I mean, that was like a small city moving President Biden there.
Jen, you asked in your interview, and it was an interesting question about how the White House is preparing for potential disruption. And I think President Biden has proved he's very deft at dealing with disruption when it comes from Republicans. He did it very well in his previous speech when Marjorie Taylor Greene got up and made a spectacle of herself. How do you expect him to respond if the disruption is on Gaza?
I can tell you how I hope he responds, which is to show empathy and to acknowledge what people are raising and to say, I share your desire to end this war and to save lives in Gaza. That is the piece that I don't think has been communicated as well as possible, which is that is what he's trying to do. And obviously there are a lot of people in the country, as we've seen, who are frustrated. But there's also a lot of people in the country who feel that some of the language they've seen from some in the Democratic Party is anti-Semitic. I'm not validating that, but it's a very difficult issue for President Biden and for Democrats because of all of that.
Yeah, one of the things it will be interesting about that part of the speech tonight is Donald Trump and the Republicans have basically maintained what I would call strategic silence on the entire question. It is really striking.
Or it just needs to finish. I think that's what he says.
You can finish the problem,
which
as a phrase is not my favorite. And what you see, however, and what you will see in the room is that there are two coalitions in American life, two parties, one of which is having an coalitional battle over this issue, and one of which is having no such battle over the issue, which is foursquare in one direction and on one side. That has been true about everyone who's been speaking about this issue from the Republican Party, every Republican member of Congress who's walked through the halls. So what will be interesting tonight will be to see that in the room, because there is no division on the Republican side on the issue, and it points in only one direction.
Let's bring into the conversation now NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. I want to bring...
The joint session will come to order.
Hold one moment.
The chair appoints as members of the committee on the part of the House to escort the President of the United States into the chamber. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise. The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer. The gentleman from Utah, Mr. Moore. The gentlewoman from Michigan, Mrs. McClain.
This list of names here that you're getting from the House Speaker, this is the Escort Committee, which is a long list of members of Congress and the Senate that will walk in along with the president to start his address. I want to bring Ryan Nobles into this conversation, mostly because Ryan is in the room. He can't join us on camera, but he can join us audio only. Ryan, can you give us any color, any sense of what you've been seeing? One of the things that we've noticed is the number of Democratic women who are wearing white. We're told that is in support of reproductive rights. It's obviously making for a quite striking visual in looking at the room.
Yeah, and Rachel, if it comes across that way on television, it's even more stark here in the room. When you walk in, your eyes are immediately drawn to this group of women, not only because they are dressed in that white color, but they're also made the calculated decision to bunch themselves all together and sit in one big block. And it certainly sends quite the message because, as I said before, your eyes are immediately drawn to them and that the message that they're sending. And of course, with everything that's happening in the country right now related to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the situation with the controversy over IVF in Alabama and the freezing of embryos, and then just in general, the overall conversation about women's rights. This was something I talked to Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal about this earlier today. She's among the group dressed in white. And she said this is something that Democratic women feel is an urgent topic that needs to be discussed. They want it to be brought to the forefront. And this is something that we see members do, right? They don't have the opportunity to speak at a night like tonight, but there's obviously millions of eyeballs that are paying attention to what's happening here in this chamber. And this is a way to subtly send a message to all those people that are watching that this is an issue that they care about. And they're not the only ones. We're going to see members wearing ribbons that denote a number of different things. In fact, there are Republican members that are wearing white ribbons that represent their concerns about the border crisis and what they would describe as the violence connected to the border crisis. Of course, that's certainly up for debate as to whether or not that's a causation or a correlation. But regardless, that's obviously an issue that is front and center for Republicans. And so these are all just kind of the subtle ways that members try to make the most important issues that they care about front and center in a speech like tonight. Because, one of the things that members do, and this is one of the things we talked to Congresswoman Jayapal about today, is that they push the White House. They say, this is an issue that we care about and we want you to talk about in this speech, but there's no guarantee that any of that is going to get into the speech. So that's part of why they want to make that message heard just in the way that they look. Rachel.
ABC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. Ryan, thank you, and keep us on speed dial. Flag us as you're noticing other dynamics at work in the chamber there. You see House Speaker Mike Johnson on the right, Vice President on the left. This is the Assistant House Sergeant at Arms. This is the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps, the longest-serving ambassador to the United States. By tradition, the longest-serving ambassador to the United States, the man who just walked on your screen there from left to right, he's the ambassador to Palau. That makes him the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps. We'll see the justices of the Supreme Court introduced shortly. We'll see the First Lady introduced fairly shortly. We'll see the Cabinet introduced shortly. Let's watch a little bit of this for a second. Watching along with us is our friend Claire McCaskill, former Democratic U.S. Senator from Missouri. Claire, am I right that you've been able to talk to some of Democratic women who are in the room tonight?
Well, I've certainly had communication texts with some of my friends and former colleagues, and they are, to a person, very optimistic about the speech. They think that President Biden is going to be very comfortable in that room. I don't think anybody in that room has been to more State of the Union speeches than Joe Biden. So he knows most of the people there, especially in the Senate side, very well. And they think he's going to be loose and aggressive. And frankly, everyone is assuming that somebody's going to act out on the other side. There is a little bit of concern that there may be some acting out around the Gaza issue. And I think what you all said earlier holds true. I think most of the members that I've communicated with think that it will give him an opportunity to show the empathy that everyone is feeling about the loss of innocent lives in Gaza in terms of the way that war is being prosecuted.
We just saw the Assistant House Sergeant at Arms announce the Chief Justice and associate members of the United States Supreme Court. You see the Chief there, John Roberts, in the lead, followed by Justice Sotomayor, Justice Kagan, Justice Gorsuch. All members of the Supreme Court sort of never attend anymore, but some interesting mix of them always does. You see Justice Kavanaugh there. It's the president's limousine there. We have, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Justice Alito hasn't attended since the State of the Union when he was kind of heckling President Obama and got caught on camera, right? That was the last time that he came?
Yes.
But we have since, so that's an interesting way to leave your mark. You think you'd want to kind of clean up that impression, come again and be well behaved, so people would remember that. We've sometimes seen former justices, retired justices.
there.
I was just going to see if Justice Kennedy is there.
Yeah, it's Kennedy.
Justice Kennedy there, and we see Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson
Yeah, Kennedy's
over the
right behind
shoulder
them
there. That's a privilege that you are allowed as a former justice of the United States Supreme Court. We should also mention along those lines that another privilege, House floor privileges, are extended to former members of Congress. There has been a little bit of buzz tonight about expelled member of Congress, George Santos, sort of proudly returning and using his floor privileges to try to attend this evening. He has pled guilty to multiple felony charges. Had he been convicted of any of those felonies, he would not be allowed on the House floor. But as a former member, even one who has been expelled, he technically can be there. So he's lurking somewhere.
Get it in while you can, really.
Yeah, exactly. Lurking somewhere and hoping desperately that we will talk about him and put his picture on television. So while I have just talked about him now, maybe that'll be it.
Maybe we should change those rules. Those rules seem a bit odd, doesn't it? You've been expelled. Why do you get to come back?
I mean,
Because nobody ever thinks of, someone like him existing, right? It's all of our conversations with Trump. How's that possible? Well, the founders didn't think of someone like him.
Can I just really quickly? I've been doing one of my favorite things to do is to text Republicans, and maybe just to remind people that I actually do know Republicans. I have Republican friends.
I was like, this is an app?
I know. There's an app where you just text the Republicans.
Chat roulette for the Republicans.
It's .org, .net. So I texted a couple of Republican friends, and it's interesting that they really are saying the same thing about what they think. Because I asked them the same question: what should or could President Biden say to win over the Nikki Haley supporters? And they've all been very clear that they think that he should laser focus, and they're saying that her base was really women who, in some cases, don't normally vote in Republican primaries, at least according to one of them. And that's who her base is. They're sort of light voting Republicans, loosely attached to the party, except for in this case, they were driven to come out because of abortion and IVF, and that he should do a heavy emphasis on trying to win over Republican women, not so much necessarily on the democracy stuff, but specifically on IVF and reproductive rights.
It's interesting because one of the excerpts they released, I mean, he's not, I don't, as you said in the beginning, he's not going to mention Trump. I would be shocked by that, even accidentally, but is clearly those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women in America. He's talking about Trump there clearly.
Yeah.
He's also lifting up and speaking to many of those Nikki Haley voters, I think, in there, and those independent women who are outraged about IVF, maybe pro-choice, and feel like this is a bridge too far.
Yeah.
We just saw President Biden walking through the Hall of Columns. He said to reporters as he passed through, of course, he's on his way to the House chamber, he said, "I'm feeling great," was his comment as he's approaching the room. It is just past 9 o'clock right now on the East Coast, which means that we are expecting shortly the House Sergeant at Arms, William McFarland, to announce the arrival of the President of the United States. And then what we will then see is the escort committee. We just heard all those members of Congress, their names, all the members of the United States Senate, a big long list of members who haven't come into the chamber yet, along with all of their colleagues, who will walk in as the escort committee for the president, and then he will start the long process of shaking hands and interacting with people in more or less performative ways, depending on the member, as he works his way down that center aisle toward the rostrum. One other thing to keep in mind, there's the man who... Yeah.
We did it.
Okay, it's done. And we're done. Thank you. The one thing that we'll be watching for, you guys might remember when we covered State of the Union last year, when President Biden finished, and last year was kind of like an up, high energy, rock'em sock'em State of the Union, including the heckling and him going back at the hecklers and getting big rounds of applause. And it was like a very kind of loose, very high energy thing. At the end of it, he stayed for 20 minutes.
Yes,
he was the last
I feel like
person
they
to
turned
do
the
it.
lights off.
Yeah. Does anybody else want to talk to me? Does anybody else? I got more. Where this came from? He loves it.
If you were with Biden on the campaign trail as a reporter or as a staffer, I mean, you'd see him do these speeches, and then he'd kibitz for a long time.
This seems like a weirdly a counterintuitive hot take, even though it's the most obvious thing you could say, which is that Joe Biden is good at politics.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Like, Joe Biden is good at politics. He's very good at politics. Like, the man really does know what he's doing. And you really see it in those sort of situations.
We discovered when I was still there at the White House that when we traveled with members of Congress, he was more elated. It energized him, which is so rare. That is not how President Obama would have felt about traveling with members of Congress, but it was, he got joy.
You have
from
a
it.
drink with Mitch McConnell. My favorite State of the Union.
But
That was absolutely the Union.
in 2022, also, when he came back from that speech that was Russia and Ukraine heavy, we all waited to cheer for him in the Palm Room, which, as Nicole knows, is kind of the room you walk back in, you walk back out. And we were there for like an hour. I mean, he was there for so long that night for the same reasons.
And I mean, part of being good at politics is enjoying that.
Yeah,
you have to be
exactly.
the kind
Yes.
of person who likes
Exactly
that.
right.
Because you can tell when you're faking it.
Yes.
That's why presidents don't tend to be introverts, and the ones who are tend to be pretty miserable in the job. I mean, we shall see. There is a pageantry and a scripted nature of State of the Union nights, which make all of these things seem familiar. That there is often, a visual signifier in the crowd on an issue or two or three. There are members of Congress who are expected to be performative and heckly. There's the expected. There's the speech being put on the podium. We see the Senate president, the vice president, and the Speaker of the House will be positioned over the president's shoulders. All of this stuff is very familiar, but there is a big wild card vibe that looms over all of it, because none of these is ever exactly the same, and especially in an election year when the stakes are so high. Especially in this election year when the stakes are this high, and with a House of Representatives that is divided by 2 in terms of the partisan division between the parties, with the turmoil that the House Republicans have been through for the first time in U.S. history, turfing out their own speaker of their own party and replacing him with another who's now riding this majority like a bucking bronco and a broken hand on the reins. I mean, this guy is barely holding on as speaker himself, and he's only been there 5 minutes. We're showing here the man who more than anyone orchestrated the ousting of the previous speaker, who not only left the speakership but left Congress altogether. I mean, this is a very, as they say, fluid situation. And that feeling in the room, I think, can manifest in some ways as sort of nervousness and jitters. Tonight, so far, it's manifesting as one of the chit-chattiest, cocktail partyist starts to a State of the Union that I think I've ever seen.
It's also eerie kind of to watch it, and I can't unsee it as the scene of the crime on January 6, 2021.
Yeah, good point,
and to
Joy.
see it seem so sort of ordinary again and sort of behaving in its traditional way that we all, the politics nerds, have been watching it for, the decades of our lives that we've been nerding out on it. But it's just changed the vibe of looking at that room. There's something eerie about it to me, that it's returned to this normalcy when it was a space of such violence and fear. And I think about those members and their staffs hiding under their desks and terrified, running out of there and figuring out where to hide, where their safe rooms were, where their panic buttons were. And, it returns to such normalcy. We're doing a normal thing, but we're doing a normal thing that precedes an election that decides, well, we'll ever get to do this again, where any of this will matter anymore. It's really eerie for me.
I also think that's an opportunity for the president, as strange as that may be to say, because that floor is so hallowed for him. I mean, it is, he feels more comfortable there than I think he does in the White House. And so I would expect he'll talk about that. And kind of who we are as a country.
The Justice Kennedy shot is reminding me of one of the things that hangs over this election. It'll be interesting to hear if we hear about it. I think we will hear about judges. But of course, justices get to, unless fate intervenes, they get to retire when they want to retire, as long as their health obtains. Justice Kennedy clearly waiting until he had a Republican office to hand that seat over to Donald Trump to fill. A Republican.
Specifically, so it would be Brett Kavanaugh.
Specifically, so it would be Brett Kavanaugh, his former clerk. There are 2 Republican appointees on that court who are over the age of 71 or 72, in Alito and Clarence Thomas, the 2 that are not there. Their fate rests in some ways. I think their future rests a lot. The decisions they might make about that, about who wins this.
Literally how they live for the next.
Yeah, I mean, hugely important. And so that it is a 6'3" court. That 6'3"-ness is not set in stone and can change, and actually is one of the things that is hangs over this entire election.
And the court has been publicly cosplaying unity in recent days, right? With the per curiam decision on the 14th Amendment. I mean, we can't tell much from body language in a moment like this, but man, to be a fly on the wall and understand what the social dynamics in that court are right now, given how much they're trying to sort of mask what clearly must be a serious cleave between the liberal justices and the conservative ones on really central issues to America.
We're seeing actually, there's the second gentleman, the husband of Vice President Kamala Harris, entering the chamber now. I will say it's about almost 9 minutes past the hour, which is means we're getting started a little bit late here. This is usually, I mean, we know President Biden is on site. He's in the Capitol. We've seen him there. We've had live images, both of him leaving the White House and of him arriving at the Capitol and being inside the Capitol building. But we are, I'm not sure what
I just want to say that
is not his superpower. I think that's
Democrats
important
are
to
never on
remember.
time. Are Democrats ever on time? Have they ever been on time for?
I just want to say that I think I would be a good second gentleman. Every time I see the second gentleman, I'm like, I would like that. I would be a good second
I
gentleman.
would say,
That seems like a dope job.
I
think I would be a good second
I would
gentleman.
vote for Kate Shaw for anything.
I would
Regardless of
Kate Shaw 2028.
as well.
So if that would be the side effect of us getting Kate in power,
Yeah.
I would take it. I would take it. And I think a lot of people would too. In terms of the guests that are in the room tonight, I mean, this is fascinating to be able to see all these the people from different branches of government chatting to each other for this extended period.
Who often don't have an opportunity to have these conversations.
Exactly.
We should note,
One of the reports that we got from our Hill reporting team is that when Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, the newest member of the court, walked into the chamber, there were loud cheers from Democratic women members of Congress who were near the aisle. Here's First Lady Jill Biden entering the room in a beautiful, kind of a sage green.
It's kind of sage, right?
The showcase of the sort of box seats where the First Lady sits with her handpicked guests, many of whom have been, or all of whom have been sort of advance noticed to the press and the public in terms of who's going to be sitting with her. A lot of them will be referenced during the president's speech this evening. The signal here is that this is getting close to beginning.
Mr. Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
Cabinet led by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, looking hale and hearty, it should be noted. Attorney General Merrick Garland, you think of him as short, he's not. This is usually the last part of the process that happens before we get the president himself introduced. But yeah, it is a boisterous and happy bunch in the room. Am I right that this is kind of vibing different than other states of the union?
It is. It's also interesting to see, well, people interacting, but who is friends, I guess, and who decides to sit next to each other. I mean, I just noted Mitt Romney and Joe Manchin looked like they were in a brother, a best friend comedy there or something, sitting together. And who chooses to sit with each other is interesting, too.
I think we had Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz sitting next to each other.
Sure, a different kind of movie.
Critical mass thing happening there.
What could go wrong?
Claire McCaskill watching this along with us. Claire, are we misreading the vibes here?
It's always pretty much like a little gab fest as you wait around and wait around and wait around. Now, I will say there's some work being done here. I don't know if you noticed, but you saw Schumer and Pelosi, and Schumer was doing his gesturing like, I'm going to win this point and I'm going to make you give in to what I want. And I also noted Pelosi talking to McConnell. So Pelosi's working, and so are some of the other members. They're running around finding people. It is very unusual to have the House members and the Senate members together like this. And it's one of the only times that the senators feel outnumbered because there's so many more House members. But it's always pretty much of a gab fest before it starts. This doesn't feel particularly more convivial than normal. It's kind of an uplifting time to be in the moment when you're there. Although an hour later, when the president is still talking, there is a little toe tapping that begins.
You see the Interior Secretary there, Dov Haaland. You see the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. You see Lloyd Austin here, the Defense Secretary in the foreground. We just saw the Defense Secretary, the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, the Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm. So the UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield there. So I will mention this is always sort of awkward because it's a little bit dark, but because of the number and diversity of government leadership that is in this room, with the principles of the executive and legislative and judicial branch, not to mention the United States military, with everybody in that same room. Each year at the State of the Union, one person who is in the line of succession for the presidency is chosen as a designated survivor, and they explicitly do not go to that room, just in case the worst happens. And tonight, it is, ready? The Secretary of Education, Dr. Miguel Cardona. So Dr. Cardona will not be there, but pretty much everybody else will. And at this point, we're waiting for the president himself to be announced.
One policy item just to look for tonight that I've been thinking about is the Trump tax cuts, which I think will appear in this speech for a few reasons. One is they will expire in 2025, and the next president will determine whether they're restored or not. And number two, they're the least popular agenda item of the last president and his signature domestic policy accomplishment. They're also a live and pressing issue, and Democrats right now enjoy in polling an advantage on taxes, which I don't think I've ever seen in my life. And I think that's partly due to that. And I think we'll expect to see the president make quite a bit of hay on that tonight.
Well, yeah, and polling shows that working class voters who Biden is intent on courting for very, very good reasons, that those tax cuts and, of course, a social safety net are among their top concerns over anything else.
A number of the people who are going to be sitting in the First Lady's box with Dr. Jill Biden are people who are there to highlight the issue of healthcare, prescription drugs, the insulin price cap, and those matters, including a man with blood cancer who has one of the drugs that Senator Klobuchar was telling you about, Chris, just a few moments ago, one of the drugs that is targeted for the first round of Medicare being able to negotiate to bring down the price of prescription drugs. That is something that has been on the policy wish list in Washington for a generation, and Joe Biden finally got it done. He's been wanting to expand the number of drugs that are included on the negotiation list, and also to expand the benefits he's been able to achieve, the $35 insulin price cap, the overall annual cap on the amount you can spend on prescription drugs out of pocket. He wants to expand those things so that they don't just cover seniors on Medicare, they apply to everybody. And I think he'll make that case tonight with an exclamation point.
It's so popular. I mean, it is more popular than almost anything else he has done. And this is why it's the perfect opportunity to talk about it, because this is when people are listening. Healthcare is also a contrast they're drawing on the campaign. So as much as this is not a political speech, this is an example where there will be the contrast with what Trump is presenting and what he is presenting, and something that's reflected on the campaign trail, too.
The parents there of Evan Gershkovich, the Wall Street Journal reporter we mentioned earlier, he's about a year now in Russia being held
this past week. Charles, I don't know.
Unjustly.
But you've been in the news.
We expect that to be discussed.
Comments you made on our last show. Do you remember, dear, what you said?
The President of the United States.
We'll rotate.
If I see a black person walking around with Trump nose, I'm going to punch him in the face.
Charles.
Oh, no, Gail.
You really can't say that because A, you don't mean it.
Oh, I mean that sincerely.
But if you see somebody, a black person with a Donald Trump,
I'm going to punch him right in the
punch him in the face.
Gail, I promise you.
I would bail you out. I would bail you out.
You're not going to be my first call.
Now, you know, it's so funny because before I took this show, before we agreed, because Charles and I, we have to say this, neither one of us were looking for another job. And CNN called and they had this great idea, you and I together, which I thought was really fun. And people said, aren't you worried about things Charles would say? And I said to you, you're a grown-ass man. You say exactly what you think, and you take responsibility.
I want to keep the mic open here, see if we can hear anything.
Yes.
And so it's not like you just really say stuff to clickbait, right?
I always know the response. And I always know how much gasoline I'm putting on the fire. Of course.
So in that vein, that clip that you all just saw has been seen millions of times, and there have been quite a few articles written about it, and that
approximately 4 inches.
He's very large. He's wearing a mugshot. He's wearing
like
a
old home
mugshot of
week.
a T-shirt or photoshops of large men wearing the T-shirt that say, "I hear Charles Barkley's looking for me." They all think that you are ready to run around punching people who vote for Donald Trump. Now,
I also just say, I mean, we're used to seeing the
That was
president
just
in the
you
security bubble,
making a
right?
point. That's
And
not
to see him
something
here, I mean,
you
he's in the most secure place in the world,
Well,
right?
let me say,
But
just my
to see
camera
everybody
right
else,
there, I
just
wanna make sure
everybody
people
reaching out and just
Number
grabbing
one,
him. And
honestly,
touching, it
I'm
is an
not
unusual
gonna
thing.
go
Like you
around
don't
punching
see
random
this.
strangers
And there
in
is
the
a lot of
face,
jockeying
first and
for the
foremost.
pole position,
Secondly, people
right? To
can
be as
vote
close as
for who they
possible, and
want
that
to.
is that's a
People
whole
can
nother
vote for
drama.
who they want to.
Do you remember Congressman
The point I
Elliot
was
Engel
trying
used to
make-
show up
Yep.
first
No,
thing in the
the point I
morning
was
to
making,
always
I
be
wasn't trying to
on
make it.
That's correct.
the aisle?
When Donald
Yeah,
Trump
a seat for
compared
himself and a
his
seat for the
plight
mustache.
with that of the black person, that
Biden loves
is what I
it. It's
had a
Christmas
problem
morning.
with.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to say this. I want to make it perfectly clear. If you're wearing
The
a black, if you're wearing a black, if you're a
153
black person,
that is
and you're
that
wearing
you
a
see
Donald Trump
members have,
mugshot,
sorry,
you are
I think what is
freaking
pinned
idiot.
to their
And I'm only
lapel.
saying freaking idiot, they won't let
153
me
is
say
the
what I really wanna say.
153
But you
days that
can figure it
hostages
out.
have
It
been
starts
held
with
by
a L.
Hamas in Gaza.
But you are.
That's Congressman Steve
Listen,
Cohn of
people can
Tennessee
vote
and
for who
Congressman
they
Steve
want to.
Horsford there from
But
Nevada
for him
next
to
to him.
compare his plight with that other African, I don't even like that term, the black people in America is
Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
asinine and stupid. And like I said, you
Isn't that on
guys
the
can
left
put
side
on
of our
those
screen?
traditional
Yeah.
small T-shirts.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who will be
like y'all
leaving
got
Congress,
on.
gave up
Get
her
a big
seat to
tie if you're
pursue
gonna wear it.
that
Don't put
Senate
on a
seat
sweater
in
and act like
California.
you got
Both she and
muscles.
Katie Porter
But
giving up their
they-
seats in
that is so-
Congress
it
to
just-
have
that
competed for
bothered
that
me.
Senate seat. They will not. Neither of those
it bothered me because for
Democratic
him to
members of Congress will be
compare
going
a
on
white
to the
billionaire
general election in November. It's such a
is in
loss in
trouble
terms of
because of
Democratic
stuff he
talent.
did.
Congressman Barbara Lee is
Not
an
because of stuff-
icon.
Yes. Black people
She's
get
an
in trouble for stuff
OG
that happened
icon of the
because
progressive
they
left.
did
She
not
was
deserve to
the
do.
squad before the
So for him
squad,
to
and I think
compare that
there's a
to
lot
black
of reverence for
people,
her. A
like,
lot of
that's
friends in
just stupid on
California
that part.
really,
I
really hate to see
appreciate
her
y'all.
leave Congress. She's a brave voice for the authentic left.
And there's MTG.
Well, interestingly, Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, and now MTG have all had these pole positions on the aisle, which is, we all know you have to be there very early in the morning to get. I wonder if they're
Yeah, she was
photobombing
clearly
the
trying to do some
president.
confrontation thing with
Yeah,
them. I'm
yeah,
not sure.
yeah.
I'm not sure it worked.
You saw Representative Al Green there, and I believe he's the one who came off of his hospital bed to make sure that he was going to cast an important vote.
Claire McCaskill is still with us. Claire, is there?
Take a selfie. I love it.
I just have to ask you about the hat. Isn't there a rule?
Yeah, I'm really surprised that she is not being asked to remove that hat. It makes me think that Speaker Johnson is really afraid of her.
Because there's a rule. Are you saying there's a strict rule, no hats for any reason, and the
Well,
floor of the House?
especially a hat that is. I mean, I'm not aware of any time a hat is allowed on the floor of the Senate. Now, I am not as familiar with the House rules, but you could never wear a hat on the floor of the Senate.
Right.
So I'm not sure, other than if the Speaker just doesn't want to have the Sergeant at Arms tell her to remove it, because well, if he did, they'd probably remove him from Speaker tomorrow, right? She'd file the motion.
Although the Sergeant at Arms is busy right now, basically trying to yank President Biden a few more inches down the aisle, since he's still nowhere near the dais, as far as I can tell. He's
Yeah,
enjoying
he's
the
going
slide.
way too
Taking his
slowly.
time.
Yeah, Senator Gillibrand there.
And he's going to talk to every single person in that room.
And he's look, he's fired up about it.
He's enjoying it. The hat is an incredibly tacky choice by somebody who it shouldn't be surprising at this point. There's nothing that she does that's surprising, but it's so beneath the dignity of the office that she holds, regardless of the QAnon stuff and all of that. She's a member of the United States Congress. At some point, one would think you would aspire to have a minimal amount of dignity in your presentation. But she has no such aspiration.
And it's a Trump 2020 hat. I'm just saying, if you're going to break the rules,
Go forward, be forward thinking.
He's now taking the pictures for them. We've moved from selfies. Can you
He
stand
likes to
still?
take selfies.
Here's Marshall
Yeah.
Fudge.
It's sometimes easier, you think, right? Like, because people get nervous when they see you or whatever, so they fumble with it. He's like, I'll do it. I got long arms, I'll do it.
Yeah.
He loves to call people's family members. So if he
I was
does
just
that,
waiting
you
for
gonna make
him
a call?
to make a call. I was thinking that might be next.
I
Maybe
feel
on the way out.
Nicole, you and Jen
a
are
good
former
move.
staffers members are having PTSD about the speed with which he is just like getting the principal to where he needs to be. Just feels like we're moving. Molasses seems fast.
See the president interacting with a number of Supreme Court justices. Ketanji Brown Jackson, his appointee first. Almost there
around
now.
the corner and up the dais.
Speaking with some of the, there you go, chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Speaking with both the liberal and conservative justices on his way up to the podium now.
I'm guessing, I mean, Jen, you know the answer. I'm guessing this pumps him up.
Yes, this pumps him up. And if you're sitting in the White House right now, you're thrilled by this because we're all here watching it and talking about it. And this shows him a person who's been caricatured as somebody that nobody in the Democratic Party wants to run for president. And people are trying to touch him and do selfies with him. So it paints a very different picture. He seems joyful. He probably is having a good time.
Claire, did you just say Tom because that was Tom Carper?
Yeah, and obviously they go way back.
Yeah.
And Tom is not running again and has been there not as long as Joe Biden has been there, but been there an awfully long time. He's almost there now, guys. He's rounding the corner. He's now over in front of the Senate section, and once he gets another few paces, he'll be up on the dais.
Claire, does this make you make you miss it? Were these fun nights for you, or were these work?
The first couple of times, it was really interesting, and I kept pinching myself that I was where I was. When Barack Obama was elected president, and while he was running, they were very interesting. We had an interesting vignette you might remember about whether or not Barack Obama snubbed Hillary Clinton that night. But after you've gone to about 6 or 7 or 8, then you really think they take too long.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, it's what, like the junior prom was exciting, the senior prom slightly less, although it's the last one. But if you had to go to like post-grad and then postdoc prom, it's still... Post-grad prom is very sad, and it happens at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday.
That is.
Because everybody has childcare issues. All right, let's watch this. Let's settle in. President Biden delivering State of the Union for 2024. As prescribed in our Constitution, we do this every year. It is never the same, and it is always important, an apex moment in American democracy.
Good evening. Good evening. If I were smart, I'd go home now. Mr. Speaker, Madam Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans, in January 1941, Franklin Roosevelt came to this chamber to speak to the nation, and he said, I address you at a moment unprecedented in the history of the Union. Hitler was on the march. War was raging in Europe. President Roosevelt's purpose was to wake up Congress and alert the American people that this was no ordinary time. Freedom and democracy were under assault in the world. Tonight, I come to this same chamber to address the nation. Now, it's we who face an unprecedented moment in the history of the Union. And yes, my purpose tonight is to wake up the Congress and alert the American people that this is no ordinary moment either. Not since President Lincoln and the Civil War have freedom and democracy been under assault at home as they are today. What makes our moment rare is that freedom and democracy are under attack both at home and overseas at the very same time. Overseas, Putin of Russia is on the march, invading Ukraine and sowing chaos throughout Europe and beyond. If anybody in this room thinks Putin will stop at Ukraine, I assure you he will not. But Ukraine can stop Putin. Ukraine can stop Putin if we stand with Ukraine and provide the weapons that it needs to defend itself. That is all. That is all Ukraine is asking. They're not asking for American soldiers. In fact, there are no American soldiers at war in Ukraine, and I'm determined to keep it that way. But now, assistance to Ukraine is being blocked by those who want to walk away from our world leadership. It wasn't long ago when a Republican president named Ronald Reagan thundered, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." Now my predecessor, a former Republican president, tells Putin, quote, "Do whatever the hell you want." That's a quote. A former president actually said that, bowing down to a Russian leader. I think it's outrageous, it's dangerous, and it's unacceptable. America is a founding member of NATO, the military alliance of democratic nations created after World War II to prevent war and keep the peace. And today, we've made NATO stronger than ever. We welcomed Finland to the alliance last year. And just this morning, Sweden officially joined, and their minister is here tonight. So they'll stand up. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And they know how to fight. Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to NATO, the strongest military alliance the world has ever seen. I say this to Congress, we have to stand up to Putin. Send me a bipartisan national security bill. History is literally watching. History is watching. If the United States walks away, it will put Ukraine at risk. Europe is at risk. The free world will be at risk, emboldening others to do what they wish to do us harm. My message to President Putin, who I've known for a long time, is simple. We will not walk away. We will not bow down. I will not bow down. In a literal sense, history is watching. History is watching. Just like history watched 3 years ago on January 6th, when insurrectionists stormed this very Capitol and placed a dagger to the throat of American democracy. Many of you were here on that darkest of days. We all saw with our own eyes the insurrectionists were not patriots. They'd come to stop the peaceful transfer of power, to overturn the will of the people. January 6th lies about the 2020 election and the plots to steal the election posed a gravest threat to U.S. democracy since the Civil War. But they failed. America stood. America stood strong, and democracy prevailed. We must be honest. The threat to democracy must be defended. My predecessor and some of you here seek to bury the truth about January 6th. I will not do that. This is the moment to speak the truth and to bury the lies. Here's the simple truth. You can't love your country only when you win. As I've done ever since being elected to office, I ask all of you without regard to party to join together and defend democracy. Remember your oath of office is defending against all threats, foreign and domestic. Respect free and fair elections, restore trust in our institutions, and make clear political violence has absolutely no place in America, zero place. Again, it's not hyperbole to suggest history is watching. We're watching. Your children and grandchildren will read about this day and what we do. History is watching another assault on freedom. Joining us tonight is Latoya Beasley, a social worker from Birmingham, Alabama. 14 months ago, she and her husband welcomed a baby girl thanks to the miracle of IVF. She scheduled treatments to have that second child, but the Alabama Supreme Court shut down IVF treatments across the state, unleashed by a Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade. She was told her dream would have to wait. What her family had got through should never have happened. Unless Congress acts, it could happen again. So tonight, let's stand up for families like hers. To my friends across the aisle, don't keep this waiting any longer. Guarantee the right to AVF. Guarantee it nationwide. Like most Americans, I believe Roe v. Wade got it right. I thank Vice President Harris for being an incredible leader, defending reproductive freedom, and so much more. Thank you. My predecessor came to office determined to see Roe v. Wade overturned. He's the reason it was overturned, and he brags about it. Look at the chaos that has resulted. Joining us tonight is Kate Cox, the wife and mother from Dallas. She's become pregnant again and had a fetus of a fatal condition. Her doctor told Kate that her own life and her ability to have children in the future were at risk if she didn't act. Because Texas law banned her ability to act, Kate and her husband had to leave the state to get what she needed. What her family got through should have never happened as well, but it's happening in too many others. There are state laws banning the freedom to choose, criminalizing doctors, forcing survivors of rape and incest to leave their states to get the treatment they need. Many of you in this chamber and my predecessor are promising to pass a national ban on reproductive freedom. My God, what freedom else would you take away? Look, it's a decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court majority wrote the following, and with all due respect, justices, women are not without electoral power. Electoral or political power. You're about to realize just how much you're right about that. Clearly, those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. But they found out when reproductive freedom was on the ballot. We won in 2022 and 2020, and we'll win again in 2024. If you, the American people, send me a Congress that supports the right to choose, I promise you, I'll restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again. Folks, America cannot go back. I'm here tonight to show what I believe is the way forward, because I know how far we come. 4 years ago next week, before I came to office, the country was hit by the worst pandemic and the worst economic crisis in a century. Remember the fear, record losses, Remember the spikes in crime and the murder rate, raging virus that took more than 1 million American lives of loved ones, millions left behind. A mental health crisis of isolation and loneliness. A president, my predecessor, failed the most basic presidential duty that he owes to American people, the duty to care. I think that's unforgivable. I came to office determined to get us through one of the toughest periods in the nation's history. We have. It doesn't make news, but in 1,000 cities and towns, the American people are writing the greatest comeback story never told. So let's tell the story here. Tell it here and now. America's comeback is building the future of American possibilities, building an economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not the top down, investing in all America, in all Americans, to make sure everyone has a fair shot, and we leave no one behind. The pandemic no longer controls our lives. The vaccine that saved us from COVID are now being used to beat cancer, turning setback into comeback. That's what America does. That's what America does. Folks, my inherited economy is on the brink. Now our economy is literally the envy of the world. 15 million new jobs in just 3 years, a record, a record. Unemployment at 50-year lows. A record 16 million Americans are starting small businesses, and each one is a literal act of hope. With historic job growth and small business growth for Black and Hispanics and Asian Americans, 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in America and counting. Where is it written we can't be the manufacturing capital of the world? We are, we will. More people have health insurance today. More people have health insurance today than ever before. The racial wealth gap is as small as it's been in 20 years. Wages keep going up. Inflation keeps coming down. Inflation has dropped from 9% to 3%, the lowest in the world, and tending lower. The landing is and will be soft. And now, instead of importing foreign products and exporting American jobs, we're exporting American products and creating American jobs. Right here in America, where they belong. And it takes time, but the American people are beginning to feel it. Consumer studies show consumer confidence is soaring. Buy America has been the law of the land since the 1930s. Past administrations, including my predecessor, including some Democrats as well in the past, failed to buy American. Not anymore. On my watch, federal projects that you fund, like helping build American roads, bridges, and highways, will be made with American products and built by American workers. Creating good-paying American jobs. And thanks to our CHIPS and Science Act, the United States is investing more in research and development than ever before. During the pandemic, a shortage of semiconductors, chips, that drove up the price of everything from cell phones to automobiles. And by the way, we invented those chips right here in America. Well, instead of having to import them, private companies are now investing billions of dollars to build new chip factories here in America, creating tens of thousands of jobs. Many of those jobs paying $100,000 a year and don't require a college degree. In fact, my policies have attracted $650 billion in private sector investment in clean energy, advanced manufacturing, creating tens of thousands of jobs here in America. And thanks to our bipartisan infrastructure law, 46,000 new projects have been announced all across your communities. And by the way, I noticed some of you strongly voted against it, or they're cheering on that money coming in. I like it. I'm with you. I'm with you. If any of you don't want that money in your district, just let me know. Modernize our roads and bridges, ports and airports, public transit systems. Removing poisonous lead pipes so every child can drink clean water without risk of brain damage. Providing affordable high-speed internet for every American, no matter where you live, urban, suburban, or rural communities, in red states and blue states. Record investments in tribal communities. Because of my investment in family farms, because I invested in family farms led by my Secretary of Agriculture, who knows more about this than anybody I know, we're better able to stay in the family for those farms and their children and grandchildren won't have to leave home to make a living. It's transformative. The great comeback story is Belvidere, Illinois, home to an auto plant for nearly 60 years. Before I came to office, the plant was on its way to shutting down. Thousands of workers feared for their livelihoods. Hope was fading. Then I was elected to office, and we raised the Belvidere repeatedly with auto companies, knowing unions would make all the difference. The UAW worked like hell to keep the plant open and get these jobs back, and together we succeeded. Instead of auto factories shutting down, auto factories reopening, and new state-of-the-art battery factories being built to power those cars there at the same. The folks of Belvidere, I say, instead of your town being left behind, your community is moving forward again. Because instead of watching auto jobs of the future go overseas, 4,000 union jobs with higher wages are building the future in Belvidere right here in America. Here tonight is UAW President Shawn Fain, a great friend and a great labor leader. Shawn, where are you? Stand up. And Dawn Sims, a third-generation worker, UAW worker at Belvidere. Shawn, I was proud to be the first president to stand on the picket line, and today, Dawn has a good job in her hometown, providing stability for her family and pride and dignity as well. Showing once again, Wall Street didn't build America. They're not bad guys. They didn't build it, though. The middle class built the country, and unions built the middle class. I say to the American people, when America gets knocked down, we get back up. We keep going. That's America. That's you, the American people. It's because of you America's coming back. It's because of you our future is brighter. It's because of you that tonight we can proudly say the state of our union is strong and getting stronger. Tonight, I want to talk about the future of possibilities that we can build together. A future where the days of trickle-down economics are over and the wealthy and the biggest corporations no longer get all the tax breaks. And by the way, I understand corporations. I come from a state that has more corporations invested than every one of your states in the state of the United States combined. And I represented it for 36 years. I'm not anti-corporation, but I grew up in a home where trickle-down economics didn't put much on my dad's kitchen table. That's why I determined to turn things around so middle class does well. When they do well, the poor go way up and the wealthy still do very well. We all do well. And there's more to do to make sure you're feeling the benefits of all we're doing. Americans pay more for prescription drugs than anywhere in the world. It's wrong, and I'm ending it. With a law that I proposed and signed, not one of you Republican buddies voted for it, we finally beat Big Pharma. Instead of paying $400 a month or thereabouts for insulin with diabetes, and it only costs $10 to make, they only get paid $35 a month now and still make a healthy profit. And I want to, but what to do next? I want to cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month for every American who needs it. Everyone. For years, people have talked about it, but finally we got it done and gave Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices on prescription drugs, just like the VA is able to do for veterans. That's not just saving seniors money, it's saving taxpayers money. We cut the federal deficit by $160 billion. Because Medicare will no longer have to pay those exorbitant prices to Big Pharma. This year, Medicare is negotiating lower prices for some of the costliest drugs on the market to treat everything from heart disease to arthritis. It's now time to go further and give Medicare the power to negotiate lower prices for 500 different drugs over the next decade. They're making a lot of money, guys. And they'll still be extremely profitable. Will not only save lives, it will save taxpayers another $200 billion. Starting next year, the same law caps total prescription drug costs for seniors on Medicare at $2,000 a year, even for expensive cancer drugs that cost $10,000, $12,000, $15,000. Now I want to cap prescription drug costs at $2,000 a year for everyone. Folks, I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, but if you want to get in Air Force One with me and fly to Toronto, Berlin, Moscow, well, even Moscow, probably. And bring your prescription with you, and I promise you I'll get it for you for 40% the cost you're paying now. Same company, same drug, same place. Folks, the Affordable Care Act, the old Obamacare, it's still a very big deal. Over 100 million of you can no longer be denied health insurance because of pre-existing condition. Well, my predecessor and many in this chamber want to take this prescription drug away by repealing the Affordable Care Act. I'm not going to let that happen. We stopped you 50 times before and we'll stop you again. In fact, I'm not only protecting it, I'm expanding it. We enacted tax credits of $800 per person per year, reduce health care costs for millions of working families. That tax credit expires next year. I want to make that savings permanent. To state the obvious, women are more than half our population, but research on women's health has always been underfunded. That's why we're launching the first ever White House initiative on women's health research, led by Jill, doing an incredible job as First Lady. We'll pass my plan for $12 billion to transfer women's health research and benefit millions of lives all across America. I know the cost of housing is so important to you. inflation keeps coming down, mortgage rates will come down as well, and the Fed acknowledges that. But I'm not waiting. I want to provide an annual tax credit that will give Americans $400 a month for the next 2 years as mortgage rates come down, to put toward their mortgages when they buy their first home or trade up for a little more space. Just for 2 years. And my administration is also eliminating title insurance on federally backed mortgages. When you refinance your home, you can save $1,000 or more as a consequence. For millions of renters, we're cracking down on big landlords who use antitrust law, who break antitrust laws by price fixing and driving up rents. We've cut red tape so builders can get federally financing, which is already helping build a record 1.7 million new housing units nationwide. Now pass and build and renovate 2 million affordable homes and bring those rents down. To remain the strongest economy in the world, we need to have the best education system in the world. And I suspect all of you, want to give every child, a good start by providing access to preschool for 3 and 4 years old. You know, I think I pointed out last year, that children coming from broken homes where there's no books, they're not read to, not spoken to very often, start school, kindergarten, or first grade, having heard 1 million fewer words spoken. Well, studies show that children who go to preschool are nearly 50% more likely to finish high school, go on to earn a 2- and 4-year degree, no matter what their background is. I met a year and a half ago with the leaders of the Business Roundtable. They were mad that they were angry. I think, well, they were discussing why I wanted to spend money on education. I pointed out to them as vice president, I met with over 182 of those folks. Don't hold me to the exact number. And I asked them what they need most, the CEOs. And you've had the same experience on both sides of the aisle. They say a better educated workforce, right? So I looked at them and I say, I come from Delaware. DuPont used to be the 8th largest corporation in the world. And every new enterprise they bought, they educated the workforce to that enterprise. But none of you do that anymore. Why are you angry with me providing you the opportunity for the best educated workforce in the world? And they all looked at me and said, I think you're right. I want to expand high-quality tutoring and summer learning to see that every child learns to read by 3rd grade. I'm also connecting local businesses and high schools so students get hands-on experience and a path to a good-paying job, whether or not they go to college. And I want to make sure the college is more affordable. Let's continue increasing the Pell Grants to working and middle-class families and increase record investments in HBCUs and minority-serving institutions, including Hispanic institutions. When I was told I couldn't universally just change the way in which we dealt with student loans, I fixed 2 student loan programs that already existed to reduce the burden of student debt for nearly 4 million Americans, including nurses, firefighters, and others in public service. Like Keenan Jones, a public educator from Minnesota, who's here with us tonight. Keenan, where are you? Keenan, thank you. He's educated hundreds of students so they can go to college Now he's able to help, after debt forgiveness, get his own daughter to college. And folks, look, such relief is good for the economy because folks are now able to buy a home, start a business, start a family. While we're at it, I want to give public school teachers a raise. And by the way, the first couple of years, we cut the deficit. Now, let me speak to the question of fundamental fairness for all Americans. I've been delivering real results in fiscally responsible ways. We've already cut the federal deficit. We've already cut the federal deficit over $1 trillion. I signed the bipartisan deal to cut another $1 trillion in the next decade. It's my goal to cut the federal deficit another $3 trillion by making big corporations and the very wealthy finally beginning to pay their fair share. Look, I'm a capitalist. If you want to make or can make a million or millions of bucks, that's great. Just pay your fair share in taxes. A fair tax code is how we invest things to make this country great. Healthcare, education, defense, and so much more. But here's the deal. The last administration enacted a $2 trillion tax cut, overwhelmingly benefit the top 1%, the very wealthy, the biggest corporations, and exploded the federal deficit. They added more to the national debt than any presidential term in American history. Check the numbers. Folks at home, does anybody really think the tax code is fair? Do you really think the wealthy and big corporations need another $2 trillion tax break? I sure don't. I'm going to keep fighting like hell to make it fair. Under my plan, nobody earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an additional penny in federal taxes. Nobody, not one penny. And they haven't yet. In fact, the child tax credit I passed during the pandemic cut taxes for millions of working families and cut child poverty in half. Restore that child tax credit. No child should go hungry in this country. The way to make the tax code fair is to make big corporations and the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. Remember, in 2020, 55 of the biggest companies in America made $40 billion and paid zero in federal income tax. Zero. Not anymore. Thanks to the law I wrote and we signed, big companies have to pay a minimum of 15%. But that's still less than working people pay in federal taxes. It's time to raise corporate minimum tax to at least 21%. So every big corporation finally begins to pay their fair share. I also want to end tax breaks for big pharma, big oil, private jets, massive executive pay when it's only supposed to be $1 million that could be deducted. They can pay them $20 million if they want, but deduct $1 million. End it now. You know, there are 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what the average federal tax is for those billionaires? No. Sacrifices, 8.2%. That's far less than the vast majority of Americans pay. No billionaire should pay a lower federal tax rate than a teacher, a sanitation worker, or a nurse. I propose a minimum tax for billionaires of 25%, just 25%. You know what that would raise? That would raise $500 billion over the next 10 years. And imagine what that could do for America. Imagine a future with affordable child care. Millions of families can get they need to go to work to help grow the economy. Imagine a future with paid leave, because no one should have to choose between working and taking care of their sick family member. Imagine the future of home care and elder care and people living with disabilities so they can stay in their homes and family caregivers can finally get the pay they deserve. Tonight, let's all agree once again to stand up for seniors. Many of my friends on the other side of the aisle want to put Social Security on the chopping block. If anyone here tries to cut Social Security, Medicare, or raise the retirement age, I will stop you. The working people who built this country pay more into Social Security than millionaires and billionaires do. It's not fair. We have two ways to go. Republicans can cut Social Security and give more tax breaks to the wealthy. That's the proposal. Oh no, you guys don't want another $2 trillion tax cut? I kind of thought that's what your plan was. Well, that's good to hear. You're not going to cut another $2 trillion for the super wealthy. That's good to hear. I'll protect and strengthen Social Security and make the wealthy pay their fair share. Look, too many corporations raise prices to pad their profits, charging more and more for less and less. That's why we're cracking down on corporations engaged in price gouging and deceptive pricing, from food to health care to housing. In fact, the snack companies think you won't notice if they change the size of the bag and put a hell of a lot fewer, same size bag, put fewer chips in it. No, I'm not joking. It's called shrinkflation. Pass Bobby Casey's bill and stop this. I really mean it. You probably all saw that commercial on Snickers bars. You get charged the same amount, and you got about, I don't know, 10% fewer Snickers in it. Look, I'm also getting rid of junk fees. Those hidden fees at the end of your bill that are there without your knowledge. My administration announced we're cutting credit card late fees from $32 to $8. Banks and credit card companies are allowed to charge what it costs them to instigate the collection. And that's more a hell of a lot like $8 and 30-some dollars. They don't like it. The credit card companies don't like it. But I'm saving American families $20 billion a year with all the junk fees I'm eliminating. Folks at home, that's why the banks are so mad. It's $20 billion in profit. I'm not stopping there. My administration has proposed rules to make cable, travel, utilities, and online ticket sellers tell you the total price up front so there are no surprises. It matters. It matters. And so does this. In November, my team began serious negotiation with a bipartisan group of senators. The result was a bipartisan bill with the toughest set of border security reforms we've ever seen. Oh, you don't think so? Oh, you don't like that bill, huh? That conservatives got together and said it was a good bill? I'll be darned. That's amazing. That bipartisan bill would hire 1,500 more security agents and officers, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backload of 2 million cases, 4,300 more asylum officers, and new policies so they can resolve cases in 6 months instead of 6 years now. What are you against? 100 more high-tech drug detection machines to significantly increase the ability to screen and stop vehicles smuggling fentanyl into America. That's killing thousands of children. This bill would save lives. and bring order to the border. It will also give me and any new president new emergency authority to temporarily shut down the border when the number of migrants at the border is overwhelming. The Border Patrol Union has endorsed this bill. The Federal Chamber of Commerce is, yeah. You're saying low. Look at the facts. I know you know how to read. I believe that given the opportunity for a majority in the House and Senate would endorse the bill as well, a majority right now. But unfortunately, politics has derailed this bill so far. I'm told my predecessor called members of Congress in the Senate to demand they block the bill. He feels political win, he viewed it as a political win for me and a political loser for him. It's not about him, it's not about me. I'd be a winner, not really. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand. But look, if we change the dynamic at the border, people pay these smugglers $8,000 to get across the border because they know if they get by and let into the country, it's 6 to 8 years before they have a hearing. And it's worth taking the chance of the $8,000. But if it's only 6 weeks, the idea is it's highly unlikely that people will pay that money and come all that way knowing that they'll be able to be kicked out quickly. Folks, I would respectfully suggest my Republican friends owe it to the American people, get this bill done. We need to act now. And if my predecessor is watching, instead of paying politics and pressuring members of Congress to block the bill, join me in telling the Congress to pass it. We can do it together, but that's what here's what he will not do. I will not demonize immigrants saying they are poison in the blood of our country. I will not separate families. I will not ban people because of their faith. Unlike my predecessor on my first day in office, I introduced a comprehensive bill to fix our immigration system. Take a look at it. It has all these and more. Secure the border. Provide a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, and so much more. But unlike my predecessor, I know who we are as Americans. We're the only nation in the world with a heart and soul that draws from old and new. Home to Native Americans, whose ancestors have been here for thousands of years. Home to people of from every place on earth. They came freely. Some came in chains. Some came when famine struck, like my ancestral family in Ireland. Some to flee persecution, to chase dreams that are impossible anywhere but here in America. That's America. And we all come from somewhere, but we're all Americans. Look, folks, we have a simple choice. We can fight about fixing the border, or we can fix it. I'm ready to fix it. Send me the border bill now. A transformational moment in history happened 59 years ago today in Selma, Alabama. Hundreds of foot soldiers for justice marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, named after the Grand Dragon of the Ku Klux Klan, to claim their fundamental right to vote. They were beaten, they were bloody, and left for dead. Our late friend and former colleague, John Lewis, was on that march. We miss him. But joining us tonight are other marchers, both in the gallery and on the floor, including Betty Mae Fikes, known as the voice of Selma. The daughter of gospel singers and preachers, she sang songs of prayer and protest on that bloody Sunday to help shake the nation's conscience. 5 months later, the Voting Rights Act passed and was signed into law. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But 59 years later, there are forces taking us back in time. Voter suppression, election subversion, unlimited dark money, extreme gerrymandering. But if you truly want to honor him and all the heroes who marched with him, then it's time to do more than talk. Pass the Freedom to Vote Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And stop denying another core value of America, our diversity across American life. Banning books, it's wrong. Instead of erasing history, let's make history. I want to protect fundamental rights. Pass the Equality Act. And my message to transgender Americans, I have your back. Pass the PRO Act for workers' rights. Raise the federal minimum wage, because every worker has a right to a decent living more than $7 an hour. We're also making history by confronting the climate crisis, not denying it. I don't think any of you think there's no longer a climate crisis. At least I hope you don't. I'm taking the most significant action ever on climate in the history of the world. I'm cutting our carbon emissions in half by 2030, creating tens of thousands of clean energy jobs, like the IBEW work is building and installing 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations. Conserving 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030. And taking action on environmental justice, fence line communities smothered by the legacy of pollution. And pattern after the Peace Corps and AmeriCorps, I launched the Climate Corps to put 20,000 young people to work in the forefront of our clean energy future. I'll triple that number in a decade. To state the obvious, all Americans deserve the freedom to be safe. And America is safer today than when I took office. Year before I took office, murder rates went up 30%. 30% they went up. The biggest increase in history. It was then, through my American Rescue Plan, which every American voted against, I might add, we made the largest investment in public safety ever. Last year, the murder rate saw the sharpest decrease in history. Violent crime fell to one of its lowest levels in more than 50 years. But we have more to do. We have to help cities invest in more community police officers, more mental health workers, more community violence intervention. Give communities the tool to crack down on gun crime, retail crime, and carjacking. Keep building trust, as I've been doing by taking executive action on police reform and calling for it to be the law of the land. Directing my cabinet to review the federal classification of marijuana and expunging thousands of convictions for the mere possession, because no one should be jailed for simply using or have it on their record. take on crimes of domestic violence. I'm ramping up the federal enforcement of the Violence Against Women Act that I proudly wrote when I was a senator, so we can finally end the scourge against women in America. There are other kinds of violence I want to stop. With us tonight is Jasmine, whose 9-year-old sister Jackie was murdered with 21 classmates and teachers in elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Very soon after that happened, Jill and I went to Uvalde for a couple of days. We spent hours and hours with each of the families. We heard their message, so everyone in this room, in this chamber, could hear the same message. The constant refrain, and I was there for hours meeting with every family. They said, do something. Do something. Well, I did do something by establishing the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the White House that the Vice President is leading the charge. Thank you for doing it. Meanwhile, my predecessor told the NRA he's proud he did nothing on guns when he was president. Oh. After another shooting in Iowa recently, he said, when asked what to do about it, he said, just get over it. There's his quote, just get over it. I say, stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. I'm proud we beat the NRA when I signed the most significant gun safety law in nearly 30 years because of this Congress. We now must beat the NRA again. I'm demanding a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Pass universal background checks. None of this. I taught the Second Amendment for 12 years. None of this violates the Second Amendment or vilifies responsible gun owners. You know, as we manage challenges at home, we're also managing crises abroad, including in the Middle East. I know the last 5 months have been gut-wrenching for so many people, for the Israeli people, for the Palestinian people, and so many here in America. This crisis began on October 7th with a massacre by a terrorist group called Hamas, as you all know. 1,200 innocent people, women and girls, men and boys, slaughtered after enduring sexual violence. The deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. And 250 hostages taken. Here in this chamber tonight are families whose loved ones are still being held by Hamas. I pledge to all the families that we will not rest until we bring every one of your loved ones home. We also work around the clock to bring home Evan and Paul, Americans being unjustly detained by the Russians and others around the world. Israel has the right to go after Hamas. Hamas ended this conflict by releasing hostages, laying down arms, could end it by releasing the hostages, laying down arms, and surrendering those responsible for October 7th. But Israel has Israel has an added burden because Hamas hides and operates among the civilian population like cowards under hospitals, daycare centers, and all the like. Israel also has a fundamental responsibility, though, to protect innocent civilians in Gaza. This war has taken a greater toll on innocent civilians than all previous wars in Gaza combined. More than 30,000 Palestinians have been killed, most of whom are not Hamas. Thousands and thousands of innocents, women and children, girls and boys, also orphaned. Nearly 2 million more Palestinians under bombardment or displacement. Homes destroyed, neighborhoods in rubble, cities in ruin. families without food, water, medicine. It's heartbreaking. I've been working nonstop to establish an immediate ceasefire that would last for 6 weeks to get all the prisoners released, all the hostages released, to get the hostages home and ease the intolerable and humanitarian crisis and build toward an enduring, something more enduring. The United States has been leading international efforts to get more humanitarian assistance to Gaza. Tonight, I'm directing the U.S. military to lead an emergency mission to establish a temporary pier in the Mediterranean on the coast of Gaza that can receive large shipments carrying food, water, medicine, and temporary shelters. No U.S. boots will be on the ground. A temporary pier will enable a massive increase in the amount of humanitarian assistance getting into Gaza every day. And Israel must do its part. Israel must allow more aid into Gaza to ensure humanitarian workers aren't caught in the crossfire. And they're announcing they're going to Gaza. To the leadership of Israel, I say this: humanitarian assistance cannot be a secondary consideration or a bargaining chip. Protecting and saving innocent lives has to be a priority. As we look to the future, the only real solution to the situation is a two-state solution over time. And I say this as a lifelong supporter of Israel. My entire career, no one has a stronger record with Israel than I do. I challenge any of you here. I'm the only American president of Israel in wartime. But there is no other path that guarantees Israel's security and democracy. There is no other path that guarantees Palestinians can live in peace with peace and dignity. And there's no other path that guarantees peace between Israel and all of its neighbors, including Saudi Arabia, with whom I'm talking. Creating stability in the Middle East also means containing the threat posed by Iran. That's why I built a coalition of more than a dozen countries to defend international shipping and freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. I've ordered strikes to degrade the Houthi capability. Commander-in-Chief, I will not hesitate to direct further measures to protect our people and our military personnel. For years, I've heard many of my Republican and Democratic friends say that China is on the rise and America is falling behind. They've got it backwards. I've been saying it for over 4 years, even when I wasn't president. America's rising. We have the best economy in the world. And since I've come to office, our GDP is up, our trade deficit with China is down to the lowest point in over a decade. And we're standing up against China's unfair economic practices. We're standing up for peace and stability across the Taiwan Straits. I've revitalized our partnership and alliance in the Pacific. India, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Pacific Islands. I've made sure that the most advanced American technologies can't be used in China, not allowing to trade them there. Frankly, for all this tough talk on China, it never occurred to my predecessor to do any of that. I want competition with China, not conflict. And we're in a stronger position to win the conflict of the 21st century against China than anyone else, for that matter, than any time as well. Here at home, I've signed over 400 bipartisan bills, but there's more to pass my unity agenda. Strengthen penalties on fentanyl trafficking. You don't want to do that, huh? Pass bipartisan privacy legislation to protect our children online. Harness the promise of AI to protect us from peril. Ban AI voice impersonations and more. And keep our truly sacred obligation to train and equip those we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they come home and when they don't. That's why the song Support and Help of Dennis and the VA, I signed the PACT Act. One of the most significant laws ever, helping millions of veterans exposed to toxins who now are battling more than 100 different cancers. Many of them don't come home, but we owe them and their families support. We owe it to ourselves to keep supporting our new health research agency called ARPA-H, and remind us that we can do big things like end cancer as we know it, and we will. Let me close with this. Yay. I know you don't want to hear any more, Lindsay, but I got to say a few more things. I know it may not look like it, but I've been around a while. When you get to be my age, certain things become clearer than ever. I know the American story. Again and again, I've seen the contest between competing forces in the battle for the soul of our nation. Between those who want to pull America back to the past and those who want to move America into the future. My lifetime has taught me to embrace freedom and democracy, a future based on core values that have defined America: honesty, decency, dignity, equality, to respect everyone, to give everyone a fair shot, to give hate no safe harbor. Now, other people my age see it differently. The American story of resentment, revenge, and retribution, that's not me. I was born amid World War II, when America stood for the freedom of the world. I grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, among working-class people who built this country. I watched in horror as two of my heroes, like many of you did, Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy, were assassinated. And their legacies inspired me to pursue a career in service. I left the law firm and became a public defender because my city of Wilmington was the only city in America occupied by the National Guard after Dr. King was assassinated because of the riots. And I became a county councilman almost by accident. I got elected to the United States Senate when I had no intention of running at age 29. Then vice president of our first black president. Now president to the first women vice president. In my career, I've been told I was too young. By the way, they're going to let me on the Senate elevators for votes sometimes. Not a joke. And I've been told I'm too old. Whether young or old, I've always known what endures. I've known our North Star. The very idea of America is that we're all created equal and deserves to be treated equally throughout our lives. We've never fully lived up to that idea, but we've never walked away from it either. And I won't walk away from it now. I'm optimistic. I really am. I'm optimistic, Nancy. My fellow Americans, the issue facing our nation isn't how old we are, it's how old are our ideas. Hate, anger, revenge, retribution are the oldest of ideas. But you can't lead America with ancient ideas that only take us back. You lead America, the land of possibilities. You need a vision for the future and what can and should be done. Tonight you've heard mine. I see a future where defending democracy, you don't diminish it. I see a future where we restore the right to choose and protect our freedoms, not take them away. I see a future where the middle class finally has a fair shot and the wealthy have to pay their fair share in taxes. I see a future where we save the planet from the climate crisis and our country from gun violence. Above all, I see a future for all Americans. I see a country for all Americans. And I will always be president for all Americans because I believe in America. I believe in you, the American people. You're the reason we've never been more optimistic about our future than I am now. So let's build the future together. Let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America. And there is nothing beyond our capacity when we act together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
President Joe Biden wrapping State of the Union address. We're just going to stick with this for a moment. I think the microphones are up in such a way that we may be able to hear a little bit of what he says as he makes his way out of the room. He sometimes takes quite some time doing this. Let's watch. Baptist preacher tonight.
Someplace you'd help and someplace you'd hurt. He looked at me and said, I'll come and campaign for you again. Whichever helps.
Come on now. Good job. Great job. Great job. Great job. Be lively. That was a sermon today. Great job. You knocked it out of the great work.
No, there's no T in Spank.
Great job, Mr. President. We're going to get that halftime so y'all can get in there. Let me see you there.
Here's what I worry about with Ukraine. If we pull away, the rest of Europe's going to pull away. And look at us. If we see something on the phone, I spend around 190 hours doing the wrong. Sometimes